March 1945. London stands under a grey sky that mirrors the weight pressing down on Europe's final battlefield. Inside 10 Downing Street, power does not shout it, pauses, watches, measures. This is where destinies are weighed, not with emotion, but with consequence. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery enters the room, carrying more than reports and maps. He carries a sense of violation, of order broken, of a carefully constructed vision disrupted by reckless speed. His posture is rigid, his voice controlled but sharp at the edges. The anger has been rehearsed, the arguments are ready. Across from him sits Winston Churchill, cigar in hand, eyes steady, unreadable. He does not rush the moment. Silence is not absence. For Churchill it is a tool. Montgomery speaks first. Patton has crossed the Rhine without authorization. No coordination, no approval, no respect for the structure that binds Allied armies together. Operation Plunder was meant to be the defining British assault, the culmination of weeks of preparation and precision. Instead, an American general has turned it into a footnote. This cannot stand, Montgomery insists. Discipline must mean something. If orders are optional, command collapses. Churchill listens. He inhales. Time stretches. Then, calmly, he reframes the entire room. So, he says at last, you want me to demand that the Americans remove their most aggressive commander because he crossed a river too efficiently. Montgomery stins. This is not about efficiency. This is about order, coordination, respect for alliance structure. Churchill cuts through the explanation with surgical clarity. No, it is about the fact that he arrived before you did. The air changes. Words retreat. What remains is truth, exposed and unwelcome. This moment, quiet, contained, and invisible to the public, reveals one of the most consequential tensions of the Second World War. It is not merely a clash of personalities. It is a collision between two philosophies of victory. One rooted in procedure, the other in momentum. One shaped by tradition, the other by outcome. To understand why this exchange mattered, one must first understand what the Rhine represented. By March of 1945, the Rhine was no longer just a river. It was the last symbolic barrier between the Allied armies and the heart of Germany. Whoever crossed it first would not simply gain ground, they would claim narrative, momentum, legacy. Montgomery understood this deeply. Operation Plunder was designed not merely to succeed, but to demonstrate. Massive artillery barrages, amphibious vehicles, airborne drops, every element synchronized, documented, and executed according to doctrine. It was British military professionalism at its finest, deliberate, overwhelming, undeniable. Churchill himself intended to witness it. This was to be a moment of affirmation, proof that Britain still commanded the stage. But history rarely honors intention alone. South of Montgomery's sector, General George S. Patton was approaching the same river with a very different mindset. No grand announcements, no ceremonial buildup, no request for permission that might slow the clock. Patton saw an opening and he took it. On the night of March 22nd, under darkness and restraint, his forces crossed the Rhine at Oppenheim using assault boats. There was no preliminary bombardment to warn the enemy. No spectacle, just movement, speed, and surprise. By dawn, the impossible had already happened. American troops were on the eastern bank. A bridgehead was secured. Casualties were minimal. Patton, true to form, made a call, not to boast, but to inform. Brad, he said quietly, don't tell anyone yet. We're across. The irony is almost cruel. Even in restraint, momentum cannot be hidden. Word spreads. By the time Montgomery launches Operation Plunder on March 24th, the truth is already circulating. Patton crossed first. Montgomery's operation succeeds exactly as planned. The machinery works. The doctrine holds. The execution is flawless. But perfection arrives second, and second place, in war as in history, carries little weight. Headlines do not discuss preparation. They announce arrival. Montgomery's fury, though often dismissed as wounded pride, is not without substance. Patton did violate protocols. He acted independently. He bypassed coordination that exists to prevent catastrophe. Had things gone wrong, the consequences could have been severe. Montgomery prepares his case carefully. Discipline cannot be optional. Coordination exists to save lives. Allied unity requires mutual respect. If insubordination is rewarded, chaos follows. These are not trivial concerns. They are the scaffolding of command itself. Yet beneath them lies something more human and more dangerous. Exhaustion. Montgomery is tired of watching American generals absorb attention, tired of British professionalism being overshadowed by American audacity, tired of restraint losing to spectacle. He demands a meeting with Churchill, not merely to argue policy, but to restore balance. The Prime Minister listens as Montgomery presents evidence, precedent, principle. He argues that success cannot excuse disobedience, that allowing Patton to continue sends a message that rules are negotiable. If orders only matter when they fail, Montgomery warns, then they no longer matter at all. Churchill says nothing. When he finally speaks, his words do not attack, they illuminate. Bernard, he says, Patton crossed the Rhine with minimal loss of life and achieved in a single night what we have spent weeks preparing to accomplish. Pause. And you want him punished for that? Montgomery protests. This is not about results. Churchill disagrees. It is entirely about results. What follows is not an argument, but a reckoning. Churchill does not deny Patton's insubordination. He does not excuse the risks. He acknowledges them fully. But he introduces a truth Montgomery cannot escape. The war is nearly over. What matters now is speed, momentum, ending the bloodshed before another generation is buried. Britain is exhausted. 5 years of war have drained its strength. Every additional day costs lives and influence. And beyond the battlefield lies another reality, political, irreversible. America has become the dominant force in the alliance. Its armies are larger, its factories unstoppable, its influence expanding. To demand that Washington remove one of its most effective commanders would not assert British authorities, would expose its limits. Churchill understands this. He understands that leadership now requires acceptance, not resistance. So he chooses effectiveness over etiquette, victory over vanity, results over resentment. We are not going to win this war, Churchill tells Montgomery, by arguing over who crossed a river first. Both crossed, both succeeded. Now the only task left is to finish. Montgomery leaves the room, furious but enlightened. Something has shifted, not just in command structure, but in the world itself. This confrontation was never truly about Patton. It was about Britain confronting its reflection and seeing a future where it no longer stands alone at the center of power. When Bernard Montgomery left 10 Downing Street that day, he carried more than frustration. He carried a realization he did not want to accept. The room had not merely rejected his demand, had exposed a truth about power, about victory, and about Britain's place in a world that was already changing shape. The meeting ended without ceremony, no official record, no communique, no declaration that silence was intentional. Churchill understood that some decisions reshape history precisely because they are not announced. The issue of Patton's insubordination was quietly buried. No demand was sent to Washington. No pressure was applied to President Truman. No disciplinary action followed. The river had been crossed physically and symbolically, and there was no turning back. Montgomery remained in command, his authority intact on paper, but subtly diminished in reality. He understood the message, even if he refused to speak it aloud. Britain could advise. Britain could protest, but Britain could no longer dictate. This confrontation was not about one American general acting without permission. It was about an empire learning to live without command over the future. Throughout the war, Churchill had fought two battles simultaneously, one against Nazi Germany, and another against time itself. From the very beginning, he knew Britain could not win alone. Survival required alliance. Alliance required compromise, and compromise, over time, required surrendering illusions. In the early years, Britain still stood as the elder statesman of war. Experience, tradition, and global reach gave it confidence. Churchill insisted on British-led operations, British visibility, British strategic input. He maneuvered diplomatically to ensure Britain remained indispensable. But war does not reward legacy, it rewards capacity. By 1945, the numbers told an unavoidable story. American divisions filled Western Europe. American factories powered the arsenal of democracy. American logistics sustained the front lines. The center of gravity had shifted, and no amount of rhetoric could move it back. Churchill saw what Montgomery could not, Tor would not. The future belonged to momentum. Patton embodied everything British military culture distrusted. He was loud where Britain was reserved, impulsive where Britain prized deliberation. He spoke of glory while Britain spoke of duty. And yet, when opportunity appeared, he moved. While others planned, he acted. This was not refinement. It was effectiveness. Churchill did not admire Patton's temperament. He did not excuse his excesses, but he recognized a pattern that history repeats without apology. Wars are not won by those who are most correct, but by those who arrive first with force intact. Montgomery's approach was professional, precise, and doctrinally focused. Patton's was risky, unauthorized, and potentially disastrous. Both succeeded, but one did so faster, with fewer lives lost. In the arithmetic of total war, that distinction outweighed procedure. Churchill's refusal to punish Patton was not a dismissal of discipline. It was an acknowledgement of urgency. The war's final chapter was being written, and every additional day meant more graves, more destruction, more instability in the world that would follow. Britain, exhausted by years of sacrifice, could not afford a prolonged conclusion driven by pride. There was also a deeper calculation, one that reached beyond victory itself. The post-war world was already forming in the shadows of the battlefield. Influence would not be distributed evenly. Those who ended the war strongest would shape the peace. Churchill understood that Britain's future security depended on maintaining American partnership, not challenging American command. To force a confrontation over Patton would fracture trust at precisely the wrong moment. Truman would not comply. America would not submit. Britain would lose credibility and gain nothing. So Churchill chose restraint, disguised as wisdom. He allowed Montgomery's anger to pass without validation. He let Patton's methods stand without endorsement. He focused on the only objective that still mattered, ending the war decisively and positioning Britain to survive the peace. This choice was not easy. It cut against everything Churchill had spent a lifetime defending: the British Army's traditions, its sense of order, its belief that professionalism was not optional. But leadership, in its highest form, is not about preserving comfort. It is about recognizing inevitability. Montgomery never forgave Patton. The rivalry did not soften, it calcified. Respect never emerged, only tolerance enforced by hierarchy. They continued to despise one another, each convinced of his own superiority. Yet after that meeting, something subtle changed. The friction no longer threatened command cohesion. The lines were clear. American generals would lead with momentum. British generals would support with structure. The alliance would move forward, not as equals, but as partners of unequal weight. Patton himself remained largely unaware of how close he had come to political removal. If he knew, he never acknowledged it. He continued advancing with the same aggressive independence until the war ended, embodying both the brilliance and danger that defined him. Churchill, meanwhile, absorbed the cost internally. He had led Britain through its darkest hour, through isolation, bombing, and near collapse. He had refused surrender when it seemed rational. He had built the alliance that ultimately crushed Nazi Germany. And now, at the moment of victory, he was forced to accept that Britain would not emerge as the world's dominant power. This was the final sacrifice, not territory, not treasure, but primacy. The meeting with Montgomery crystallized this truth. Britain was transitioning from empire to partner, from command to council, from center to pillar. Churchill managed this transition with discipline and foresight. He did not resist the inevitable. He shaped it. By yielding gracefully, he preserved influence where resistance would have destroyed it. This pattern would repeat after the war, in NATO, in global diplomacy, in the so-called special relationship. Britain would support American leadership while maintaining the appearance of equal footing. Reality would be understood, even if not spoken. The seeds of that future were planted in moments like this: quiet refusals, unrecorded decisions, uncomfortable truths accepted without applause. Montgomery's argument had merit. Discipline does matter. Protocol exists for a reason. Independent action carries risk. History is filled with disasters born from unchecked ambition. But Churchill understood something deeper. Wars are not moral exercises. They are contests of outcome. Victory does not belong to the most courteous. It belongs to the most effective. The Rhine crossing captured this tension perfectly. Two philosophies, two methods, two successes, but one arrived sooner, at lower cost, and with decisive psychological impact. That difference mattered more than form. Churchill's decision to defend results over regulation reveals why the Allies ultimately prevailed. They tolerated difficult men. They accepted unorthodox methods. They prioritized momentum over comfort, and in doing so, they won. Yet this victory carried a price Britain alone would pay in full. The empire that once shaped the world was giving way to a superpower that would define it. Churchill did not deny this shift. He did not rage against it. He absorbed it and adapted. That is why history remembers him not merely as a wartime leader, but as a transitional one, a man who guided his nation from dominance to dignity. When Churchill told Montgomery that his demand was driven by wounded pride rather than strategy, he was not insulting him. He was awakening him. Not everyone welcomes awakening. Montgomery remained convinced of his correctness. He remained convinced that professionalism should outweigh audacity. In principle, he was not wrong, but principle alone does not close wars. Patton crossed the Rhine without permission. Montgomery crossed with perfection. Both succeeded, but only one reshaped the tempo of the campaign. In the calculus of history, tempo matters. Churchill never forgot this. He understood that leadership sometimes means standing between pride and progression, choosing progress, even when it hurts. This was the true lesson of that confrontation. Not about rivers or generals, but about humility in the face of change. The greatest victories often demand the greatest surrender, not of territory, but of ego. And those who are chosen to lead through such moments are rarely celebrated for the sacrifices they make unseen. They are remembered only by the world they leave behind.